Oi, oi, it's your boy, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast coming at you on Wednesday. And we're going to be talking about Dan Ige versus Korean Zombie this weekend, or for this weekend. Right now, I've just bounced out of a Karo Parisian sadness hole because someone commented on the Reddit daily discussion thread. We know that performance-enhancing drugs are banned, but what about performance-debilitating drugs? And I, being the quippy fucker that I am, wrote the Karo Parisian story, and then I felt sad and I had to go and watch a load of Karo Parisian, and I felt even sadder because he was enormously talented. If you've not seen, we're probably getting to the point where a lot of my listeners have never even heard of Karo Parisian. His heyday was similar time to Diego Sanchez, but he didn't stick around as long because he had a ton of drug problems. Yeah, I mean, he was making judo a thing in MMA before a lot of other judoka. You know, Fedor is probably most people's touch point until Ronda Rousey, but Karo Parisian was tossing world-class welterweights on their heads and looking good doing it. But then got addicted to painkillers, I think it was. It was very weird. His last fight in the UFC was cancelled, I think, due to painkillers or something like that being detected in his system, like in huge amounts. I'm going to have to revisit that whole thing, but that'll just make me more depressed. So that's what I've been doing. Now I'm sitting in a darkened room in my pants, basically, underpants for American listeners, my knickers, because it's fucking sweltering here. So I've got the blinds down and I've had to turn the fan off so that I can podcast and close all the windows, obviously. And yeah, so I'm just a sweaty hot mess. But enough about me. Let's talk about the fights going on this weekend. There's a PFL card. I mean, they are looking better and better, these PFL cards, but I am not getting them in the UK, so I can't really cover them that extensively. But Rory McDonald versus Gleison Tibau. If Gleison Tibau loses that fight as he's supposed to, I will be tweeting, Khabib's loss to Tibau is aging worse by the day. Just because I love having angry men writing in squiggly all over my tweets. The No Moustache Brigade checking in to defend their leader. And I've just dropped tea all down my bare chest. God's plan. This card this weekend, couple of interesting ones on it. There's a guy called Josh Parisian, but spelled slightly differently. I presume he's not related to Karo Parisian. Yep, the headliner is Korean Zombie versus Dan Ige. Chan Sung-jung, a name that I got used to saying because we weren't supposed to call him the Korean Zombie. Then they decided to just bill him as the Korean Zombie. Jung coming off the loss to Ortega back in October. Knockout over Frankie Edgar a year earlier than that. Ige sparked Gavin Tucker in 20 seconds on like his first punch of the bout, but before that lost to Calvin Kattar. So one coming off a win, one coming off a loss, but neither far removed from a loss that sort of halted a period of momentum. The Korean Zombie one, very interesting because, Brian Ortega, his hype completely rebounded off that fight. No one was interested in the fact that he's a jiu-jitsu guy who can't do takedowns anymore. It was like, oh, now he's southpaw and he's boxing up the Korean Zombie. Problem was that he hit the Korean Zombie with a back elbow very early on that might have hurt Korean Zombie for like the remainder of the fight, and then just kept the pressure up and beat him silly. So Brian Ortega really like a bit of an enigma. You know, how much of this reinvention is actually effective? Yeah, I mean, we need more fights to know that, but they bounced him right into a title shot. Whereas Dan Ige, his loss to Calvin Kattar was, I mean, like a couple of his wins. The Barboza one, I think the Bektik one too, just bad game planning. You know, he's a guy with a ton of skills in a load of different areas, but he's never leveraging them the correct way against his opponent. Even the Tucker one might have turned out to be like that, because he came out to counterpunch Gavin Tucker when he probably had an enormous edge in the wrestling and grappling. But the Kattar one, pretty unforgivable because he was clearly losing that fight and he still never really got going. And the Barboza one, you know, he won the decision, but it was a split decision and it was pretty bad. Most people thought the Barboza won it. The Barboza one is a really obvious example to use when I'm talking about his bad game planning, because Edson Barboza, there is a set game plan to beat him, and most top-level lightweights are capable, if they follow the game plan and they push it through wholeheartedly, of doing that. Or featherweights rather, but Dan Ige went about it about the worst way possible. You know, Edson Barboza, you want to corner him against the fence and push him back so that he can't kick comfortably. And if he is kicking, he's giving up easy takedowns or steps up the inside with counterpunches. Dan Ige decided that he was going to burst in with a couple of punches at a time and then step out the side door, relieving all the pressure in the process. So he managed to fail to apply pressure at all against Barboza, but still scrape the win. But that Tucker one, still great. Wipes the memory of that. I think with Korean Zombie, we are expecting at some point a drop-off based on just the amount of punishment he's taken over the years. He did, he sharpened up a lot over the years. He came into the WEC as this wild man brawler with some interesting grappling. And he became one of the featherweight division's craftiest counterpunchers. Very tricky guy. Has this weird sort of punching style where he'll slip and he'll throw his arm almost straight-armed swing styly, but just clip people with them. And it's not the most economical. Yeah, that's the one. Economical punching style, but he has his timing down so that he lands them really well. And he can throw straight punches. He knocked out Oleinik with a good straight right, counter straight right. And he does throw them throughout, but his sort of looping swings are really what interest me about him. Decent kicking game. I mean, he kicked well with Yair Rodriguez. And just a fun, scrambly fighter all round. If there's a letdown, possibly the takedowns, but they're functional enough. We're not at a Brian Ortega level of just can't take people down, even if you try. But we're not at a Charles Oliveira level of people looking at Oliveira and going, well, see, he's not a wrestler, but he gets by on his jiu-jitsu, and completely overlooking that he's just manhandling really good wrestlers in the wrestling. Somewhere in the middle is probably where Korean Zombie falls there. But after he came back after that period of military service, because South Korea has mandatory military service. Well, I mean, both Koreas have mandatory military service, but South Korea has mandatory military service. And I think we've just lost Korean Superboy to that too. But, it's 2 years. Basically, if you're an athlete, you're probably going to get a desk job or something like that and continue training. I think that's what Jung had. It's kind of weird because Jung was a top 10 featherweight in the world when he went away on that on his military service. But the Korean Army has its own StarCraft team. If you're doing a real sport like StarCraft, you're all right. It's if you're doing a joke sport like UFC, they make you do the full service. Actually, the guy from BTS is about to have to do his military service, and they're going to try and find a way around that. Last I heard. But so we lost him for, I think he ended up being out for the best part of 3 years, as it turned out. And then he came back against Dennis Bermudez. And honestly, it was the best wrestler, aggressive wrestler, someone pursuing takedowns, not including someone like Aldo, who's amazing in the wrestling exchanges, but not going to take you down. It was the first time he was taking on a really good takedown artist. So there were all kinds of questions there. And he stopped his takedowns and sparked him in 2 minutes. So I'm consistently impressed with him. It's just that he does tend to get lumped up pretty badly. The Yair knockout was ugly. He got hit a lot by Brian Ortega in his last one. So I'm expecting him to show signs of wear sooner rather than later. Especially, like we said, he changed his style and he became more technically proficient and less about just the actual Korean zombieing. But he still took all that punishment up to that point. You don't get it back. Unless you're Alistair Overeem and you suddenly regrow your chin somehow. But if we talk about this fight, I think Dan Ige is more likely. I would love to see him go to the wrestling and try and use the cage wall to batter Jung, but I think you're more likely to see just a straight up matching of boxing and counterfighting. They're probably both willing to crack. I would imagine that Jung will go for the takedown before Ige will. Interested to see what he can do, because worse fighters than Korean Zombie, or worse wrestlers than Korean Zombie, have got Ige down. He's very good off his back. I just posted my favourite clip of Dan Ige this morning on my Twitter, which is when, I think it's Jordan Griffin is in his guard, and Dan Ige opens up his cuff of his glove with both hands, Griffin's glove this is, and inserts his fingers deep as he would for a cat's paw grip on the gi. And then the guy stands up and he basically uses a gi cross guard to enter on the leg. And the referee's watching him do this, peel the guy's glove open, put his fingers in, doesn't do anything about it. But otherwise, yes, Ige is very good on the bottom, gi or no gi. I think if you're Zombie, probably kick lots, because if there's one thing that I've not been impressed with from Ige, it's his kicking. Calvin Kattar, we all knew he had a lot of trouble with kicks and with covering up too much. And Ige didn't bring either of those to Lever very well against Kattar at all. Just engaged him in a boxing match and lost. So a lot of low kicking from Zombie to get Ige kicking back would be good. And Zombie's pretty good at timing his right hand on the low kick. From Ige, he is a switch hitter, so he could take a page out of Ortega's book and fight southpaw for long periods of the bout, because he does a lot of his works orthodox, but if he comes out southpaw for the whole bout, or large portions of it, might be able to throw Zhang off, certainly able to hand fight with his lead hand, line up the rear hand as he did against Tucker, though that was the other way around, as in orthodox southpaw. Don't really have a lot more else to say about this one, just it's an interesting fight. It's the featherweight division. It's almost impossible to pick two names from the top 20, 30 fighters in the UFC and have a bad matchup. Everything there is good all the time, always. So quick whistle-stop tour of the rest of this card. Actually, no, this one's a good one. Marlon Vera versus Davey Grant. Marlon Vera, Cheeto, everyone loves him. Bit of a dickhead in interviews, but otherwise everyone loves him. One of the most entertaining styles in the game. Coming off a loss to Jose Aldo by decision. Competitive fight, but still just Aldo being enormously classy on the feet. But before that, obviously, the win over Sean O'Malley. How much stock you want to put in him winning that fight versus Sean O'Malley being made of paper? It's up to you, but he did a decent job in that fight, however short it was. I don't know if it told us an awful lot. I think they could have a rematch and have a different fight, but I enjoyed it, liked what he was doing. And decision loss to Song Yudong, which I believe I felt he won. That was a bit of a strange one, even stranger that it was unanimous. But before that, he was on that streak of like 6 fights, all finishes, no, some of them are chokes, but I was going to say all knockouts, but not. But like going back to 2018 to 2020, he just ran roughshod through a load of guys who weren't super talented, as in like elite of the elite. But it's like the Charles Oliveira thing. We're finding out that sometimes some of these guys who come in very young, throwing them against the wall of elite level competition every day, or every time out, gives them this checkered record. And then when you take a step back and you let them build up some confidence against lesser fighters, you put them in with a top guy again and they just run through him. Charles Oliveira, now UFC champion. And especially as like a lot of what Oliveira was known for was being a front runner and then losing when he fell behind, being sort of a choke artist or someone who gives up under pressure or can't get back into it under pressure. And then he fought a load of lesser guys, built up his confidence, didn't really face a lot of adversity against them. And then suddenly when he's facing adversity again against like Kevin Lee and particularly against Michael Chandler, he just looks brilliant. So confidence is obviously a real thing in fighting, but, as someone who's very vocally against deliberate mismatches, I do think that there is a place for stepping back the level of competition for some of these especially these guys who come in young and just take a beating early on. Not everyone is going to be, well, very few people are going to be John Jones and just never face a loss, from age 20 to winning the title almost immediately. Meanwhile, Davey Grant, 35, but has been in the UFC for like the best part of 10 years, or certainly The Ultimate Fighter. His first UFC fight was The Ultimate Fighter finale, 2013. So he's been around for, 8 years? Fuck, can't do maths early in the morning. The sort of surprise about Davey Grant is that he hasn't had an awful lot of fights in that time. Lots of cancellations. He blew out his knee, got a bad staph infection, got coronavirus, or his last one, his one against Lewis Smolka was cancelled due to coronavirus. But he's had some long layoffs and really only managed like 6 or 7 fights in the UFC over the course of almost 10 years. However, his last 3, he's really sort of drawn attention. Grigory Popov, he beat by split decision, but the Martin Day one sparked him, and Jonathan Martinez sparked him, and he's been doing some interesting stuff. And again, he looks like a guy who's sort of getting his confidence. If I had a criticism of Davey Grant in his last one, it was real signs of that Dong Hyun Kim thing, where the original Dong Hyun Kim, not the, Miles Morales Dong Hyun Kim. No, Dong Hyun Kim, like he'd try one sort of gimmicky, flashy technique, and then he'd just go to it over and over again. So the one that everyone remembers is that he knocked out John Hathaway with a back elbow. Comes out against Tyron Woodley, every strike is a back elbow. Tyron Woodley hits him in the back of the head as he's spinning and brains him, basically. But before that, he'd fought Sean Pearson? Can't remember, not going to check. But he threw a bicycle kick, so pumped his rear leg up and then jumped and kicked with his lead leg, and he landed it once, So then he threw it another 25 times. Literally, go and watch that fight. It's incredible. The man did not have a gift, or he didn't have the mind of, that sort of fighter's psychology. That sort of being able to go, well, I've thrown it twice, I won't throw it again for a bit. I feel like in the Hathaway one, he was throwing the elbow a lot too, but because it landed and scored the knockout, everyone just forgot the other ones that he missed. But there was a good bit of that with Davey Grant. He was trying this switch step right uppercut to like left hook or left overhand or whatever. So he's switching to southpaw with the right uppercut, which is a really cool technique. There was a great one in Crush a little while ago. I can't even remember who it was. It's all lads with spiky bleach blonde hair, and I basically get the digest of it from Twitter. But it was really nice. The guy went from from orthodox to southpaw, switched with the right uppercut and threw a left high kick. And the uppercut didn't catch the guy, but he stood upright away from it, like he pulled his head back. And the left high kick just caught him square on the neck. It was gorgeous. There's a few like that. Yodson Klai, who was southpaw, used to do a lot of lead hand uppercutting to left high kick or left body kick, because the uppercut stands the guy up. Either his head pokes over the top of his guard, or, high enough into the top of his guard that you can kick his hand into his neck. Or when his head goes back, his elbows come up with it and you can sneak in the body kick underneath. Or it was Yodson Klai, so if he kicked the arm, that was fine too. But the thing was that Davey Grant went for this switch step right uppercut about 100 times in this fight. And I think it worked. Yeah, I mean, he won the fight by overhand left, so I'm going to assume that was the one that caught him. But it was round 2, it was 3 minutes in, and he'd attempted it like 40 times. So there's that, but also the other thing is that like his last couple of opponents have allowed Grant to sort of work out in the open and dance around them. And he's really used his movement very well to set up his punches, and it's given him the chance to dance and do these like shifting right uppercuts and shit. But Marlon Vera, when he's on, is very much a pressure fighter and he's going to force you back. And while an aggressive fighter gives you better chances to cut angles or cut deeper angles on them because they're moving towards you, it does take away, if you keep the guy on the back foot and you're pressing into him constantly and you're smacking him with hooks and low kicks and things every time he tries to dart off to the side, it gets very hard to operate that sort of like floating around the cage fighting style. If you're Vera, front kicks to the body, massive for him. Use both stances, enter clinches, get the underhook and the head post and just knee the shit out of the body. Grant, very gangly guy at this weight too. If you're Grant, you've got to use your movement and stay off the cage, or have something to punish Vera when he comes in and you're on the cage. Use counter elbows. Be interesting to see what he can do against Vera's front kicks. Vera doesn't really turn them over into high kicks very effectively. It's pretty clear whether he's going for a round kick to the head or a front kick to the body. Whereas, if you've got like an Israel Adesanya or someone like that who can turn it over almost effortlessly, that it's very hard to start reaching for kicks. But against Vera, you might as well just try and catch the kicks and turn them into takedowns, or catch them and turn them into angles and start hitting. Also, the body work from Jose Aldo against Marlon Vera seemed to do well, slowing him down. Marlon Vera, one of the guys in that division who uses body work very well. He recognizes that he's got a great gas tank. He can crush the other guy's gas tank by working their body. But again, a lot of like hard-nosed, forward-pushing pressure fighters, they expect to get blasted in the head. They do their best to deal with it, like to move their head or to check your hands or whatever, but they're very happy to get blasted in the head if they get you in position to then continue beating you up. A lot of them, you could turn them back more easily with body shots. But yeah, elbows coming in, knees to intercept him. But then if you throw knees, you risk getting clinched up and getting into a knee battle, and Vera's very good at kneeing. So yeah, I mean, this one seems to live and die whether Grant can stay off the fence. I could see him attempting to take Vera down. Vera's good off his back, but has that same sort of problem that a lot of guys who are good off their backs have, which is he then gets too happy being on his back. If you're like, yeah, I can attack from here just as well, and you've conceded a 1-0 advantage on the takedowns, you're happy to sit there and lose the rest of the round. It's the Diego Ferreira curse. So that's a good little fight. Keep your eyes on that. Oleinik versus Spivak should be decent. A couple of guys who just love doing the head and arm throw in men's MMA at heavyweight. Yeah, you'll get some decent grappling out there. I honestly, at this stage, you know what Oleinik's going to do, or Oleinik rather. He's going to try and submit you. He's going to gas out, and then he's going to get beaten senseless, either as the guy repeatedly forces the referee to get him back on his feet, or he'll get stuck on the bottom and pounded out. It's like Frank Mir, but it played out. I mean, it did play out the same sort of way with Frank Mir. He'd grab something, he'd crank the shit out of it, he'd gas himself out, and then he'd just get stuck underneath dudes. What else is good? Diego Lima versus Matt Brown. Diego Lima going to try and redeem the Lima brothers this weekend. I mean, this one will tell you how shot Matt Brown is. Because, I mean, Matt Brown's pretty shot, but Diego Lima will stand on the fence and do nothing, like his brother. And Matt Brown wants people on the fence and drives an incredibly high pace. So if he gets sparked in this one, that'll be all on Matt Brown's toughness and chin disappearing, probably. Vera Jandiroba's back. She's always fun. Rick Glenn is around. Hey, haven't seen him since... I mean, he's fought since the Gavin Tucker one, but I haven't really seen him much since then. Hold on. Smashed Gavin Tucker in 2017 in one of the most lopsided beatings in the UFC, in the modern UFC, that is. Lost to Miles Jury by decision. Oh, Miles Jury was on the way out, so that's not good. Split decision, Dennis Bermudez, and then lost to Kevin Aguilar. And hasn't fought since 2018. So, yeah, a bit of a rough run for Glenn. He had a fight booked in December, but tested positive for COVID-19 as well. God, just everything coming up. Rick Glenn. He's fighting Joaquim Silva. I hope he gets it done. He always seemed like a guy, well, especially after the Gavin Tucker fight, he seemed like a guy with a ton of potential. Or at least potential as like a great journeyman spoiler. And Chaos Williams is around too. So I think that's about it for that card. Do a couple of questions and then we'll get out of here for today. Oh, people asking me who I'm maining in Tekken. I literally just came back to it. I bought it on sale a couple of months ago. Didn't really play it. And then they released this lass, Lydia, who's a Shotokan karateka. And I found out her motion capture was done by Naka, who I know and trained with for a while. So I was like, damn, cool, gonna check it out. So I main her. I've been having great fun just beating the shit out of people with the newest character that no one's quite sure how to counter yet. And then otherwise, I like Ganryu because I like the Rikishi in every game. Always pick the sumo wrestler. And is it Dragonov, the Rusky lad? Spinning knife hand chop to the shin is the greatest weapon. I wish it worked in real life. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And hating King and Armored King, because I used to love King, but I don't actually know how command grapples work, and I can't be bothered to look it up. And then on top of that, the new Guilty Gear came out. Looks amazing. I've always wanted to try Guilty Gear, but I'm barely hanging on in Tekken. Guilty Gear is supposed to be like 3 times as complicated. So yeah, hit me up with your reviews of Guilty Gear. So on to the formal questions. Jack, enjoying all your videos and breakdowns, but I won't suck you off too long. I have a question about footwork. In MMA, footwork seems to be a bit of an underdeveloped aspect of a fighter's toolkit. I assume we will see leaps and bounds in that area eventually. My question is about the difference in footwork in boxing as compared to kickboxing, Thai boxing, karate, and whatever the hell other else approach to striking there is out there. I know there are a lot of differences in the sports and how they approach footwork, dealing with the different tools available to each discipline. Are there any bits and pieces from boxing, kickboxing, and the likes that you think would be primed to make their way into a coach's teachings? Also, what do you feel the future of footwork in MMA is? Thanks for the answer, and thanks for the content. I'll just sidestep you, bro. Bless from Blaine Henry. So I assume that's Blaine Henry of the Fight Library, my boy. So footwork. Yeah, I think the footwork is one of the most interesting areas of fighting generally. And to be honest, one of the reasons that I've been having so much fun with the new Tekken, I'm not on the pay of the new Tekken, but I've just been enjoying like the 3-dimensional movement and the usefulness of sidesteps, which was something I always enjoyed in Fight Night Champion. You know, you could fight very, very linearly if you wanted to with backsteps and stuff, but you could also fight very laterally. I feel like that game did a really good job of letting you choose or gravitate to certain styles. But anyway, sorry, in real fighting, footwork's really interesting because it can be very functional. You know, you only do what you need to, or it can be as in-depth as you want. You know, the more complexity you add to it. Well, even that's not true, because I was going to say the more complexity you add to it, the more it can be used to set up other stuff. But footwork becomes like feints, and feints only work to the level of your opposition. You know, like if someone's throwing out really subtle body jab feints at me and I'm not picking up on them, that feint's not working because I'm too slow for it. But you can get really off the deep end with what footwork is, and you can really stay quite safe and have very functional footwork, and that can still be great. You know, you could get you could be noted for your amazing footwork just by keeping the right place in the ring. Someone like, fuck it, I'm about to praise Valentina Shevchenko. But Valentina Shevchenko, what she does very well is that very small shuffling to stay right on the end or just beyond the end of the opponent's reach to convince them to like swipe at her lead leg, and then she'll backstep and do some silly bullshit. But keeping that perfect distance, that's all footwork. That's all correcting with very small adjustments. And then you've got like the Dominic Cruzes and stuff who use their footwork to be gliding around the ring constantly and keeping their opponent turning and then stepping in before the opponent expects it or while they're busy turning. I think the current low kicking meta has brought out some interesting questions about footwork in MMA. We talked about like one of the easiest ways to deal with it is to pick your leg up before you go in. And if you can establish like a lead leg high kick or a lead leg push kick as well, that's going to make that far more effective. So fight 2 between Volkanovski and Max Holloway stands in a shorter stance. Holloway, this is, establishes the lead leg high kick and a couple of push kicks and starts picking his leg up and stepping in. He doesn't really he doesn't do that sort of sideways glide in with the jab, which it was really nice to see that catching on in MMA, guys using that jab so well and gliding in sideways. But there is that weakness there. It's always probably going to be there. And that's where this, chess isn't a great comparison for fighting, but that's where it becomes that sort of tit for tat. Everything has a trade-off thing. The low kick is something that anyone can do, and anyone can pick up on your timing and do it if you don't throw off their timing. If you're not doing other things, the jab on its own isn't going to cut it anymore. BJ Penn, like prime BJ Penn, in this current moment, would get annihilated by low kicks by probably worse fighters than you would expect. Someone like Jim Miller did it a little bit against Dustin Poirier, even as an old dude. But then there's a sort of intrigue to that because I was watching something on Sylvie Douglas Vonitu, or Sylvie Chemical X, I think she is fighting now. She's got this amazing Patreon page in the Muay Thai library. And I'd seen a few of the freebies that she'd put out there, but I'd never signed up for it. Bit the bullet, signed up for it. Fantastic. Absolutely worth it. Plugging it here. But she did one with a guy called Sifu Robert McGuinness. And she's done stuff with Diesel Noy and just about every other famous Nak Muay there's ever been, like from the golden age. And then I'm seeing Sifu Robert McGuinness, and I was like, okay, let's give this a chance. And a guy that I'd never heard of, but was the boxing coach at the, I think the Sichot-dong gym, where tons of champions trained. And he's doing these boxing drills, and it's so strange because he's jabbing in and out with the lead foot sideways. And he's saying, and they're talking about the danger of the low kick, and he's saying, when your foot hits the ground in this position, it should be completely solid. So if the guy kicks, you just follow with the two. So it's really interesting. Even having your foot sideways and your stance more bladed might not be, if you stand a little bit shorter and a little bit higher, you might be able to condition yourself for that kick. Yeah, very interesting. I highly recommend signing up to her Patreon and going and checking out that episode in particular. It was really interesting because it's a guy who came from Kung Fu and Kyokushin and stuff, went over to Thailand, was a boxing coach at one of the best gyms, and then refereed at Lumpini as well. So really interesting character. I think with developments in footwork, I think you're going to see a lot more guys standing longer and then retracting the lead leg, or standing shorter and retracting the lead leg. It's such a useful movement. I mean, this is pure Muay Thai stuff now. And to a degree, contact karate, because for a long time you weren't allowed to check in some of the competitions. So you just had to either pull your leg out of the way or lean into it and take it. But retracting the lead leg sets you up so well to counter kick, and you don't really see anyone doing it. I mean, I always reference Izzy versus Rob and Nunes versus Holm. That was dealing with the stamping low line side kicks. Pull your leg back, let them fall forwards, and try and kick them in the head off the same side. But the great thing about retracting the lead leg is that you can kick off both legs. And with round kicks, especially high kicks, you don't need 1 foot behind you to generate power. It's not like stepping into punch or throwing a good front kick, a good digging front kick to the body. You want something behind you to push off, or a foot behind, 1 foot behind the other. Whereas if you're throwing high kicks, you could do that from feet level. Using the lead leg as bait, I think, is something that we're going to see a lot more of, and light lead foot stuff. You were talking about the difference between different martial arts, but like, if you watch Muay Thai, the constant slight bouncing from one leg to the other to try and get to make sure that you can bring a leg up to check in time, because the kicks are the biggest concern. And you also see them like when they back onto the ropes, standing on one leg and using the lead leg really light to kick and stuff like that, which I've seen work in MMA. That is actually legit. Benson Henderson versus Brandon Thatch. Brandon Thatch backs him up. Benson Henderson hits the fence, plants his back leg, and teeps off his lead leg. And Brandon Thatch just runs onto it. Same thing with Rob versus Yoel Romero, or Whittaker versus Yoel Romero. I think 2, where he got stunned, and it's just a perfect sequence of like all the things you can do when you're hurt. So he like moves in to smother the guy. He tries to run from the guy. He presses him back to the fence and push kicks the guy as he steps in. It's just constant movement, exactly what you should be doing when you're in trouble. I think you're probably going to see a lot more of that switch step too. It's really big in kickboxing at the moment, the switch step lead uppercut, or switch step 2 lead uppercut. It's a big, I think Dwayne Ludwig's a big fan of it too. I think there's a lot of stuff that could be done with it. I think what's going to be really interesting is if you can start switching to fake. Like Saenchai did a lot, but switching to fake and then coming back to your orthodox stance, or your regular stance rather. I think that's going to be very interesting if you can get away with that in MMA. I'm about to start writing Advanced Striking Aldo, which I've been putting off for a long time. But one of the interesting dualities of Aldo is most people want to be more bladed for striking and square up to stuff the takedowns. Whereas Aldo, and that's because when you sprawl on someone, you want to be square. Also, if you really square, like in a proper wrestling match, if you watch any wrestling, most of it is done from square, and then you hop into a 1 foot forward stance and shoot. Someone's got an amazing breakdown of that. Dan Sweeney, DPS breakdowns. He does a great one of, I think it's David Taylor, the Magic Man. But these guys go square and then they hop into a staggered stance to shoot. Or to have a penetration leg and shoot. But the square on thing means that if the guy does take a lazy shot at you, you're square, you can sprawl, you can dig under because you can pull him up, you can make an upper body fight out of a low shot. But Aldo's the opposite. He fights more square, which sets him up to he used to love switch knees and switch kicks, doesn't do that so much anymore, but sets him up to check kicks better. But then when the opponent shoots, he blades his stance and goes more side on, to force them down the leg and limp leg out. He's a complete reversal of the basic sort of like sprawl and brawler setup. Square when fighting, bladed when defending the shot, as opposed to bladed when fighting, squared when defending the shot. Anyway, I've rambled about that enough. I reckon that'll do us for today. I am going to be back on Monday. Writing something at the moment, might get it out before the weekend. Not going to be the Aldo thing. It's something different that I've got to finish up first. But if you want to support the podcast, get in on the extra stuff, be a boy, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Dan Ige consistently winning in spite of bad game planning, so that I can't justifiably give him the But Why award for bad game planning. Bless.